this empire is that we have managed to subjugate, to put aside, to sweep under the rug every principle that I grew up believing was what makes America great. And we need to turn that around. The very things that you all joined the military to fight to support, we've managed to subjugate, and we need to change that. So let's talk about how we can do that. Let's move on to the good news. And again, the good news is we know we live on a very, very small planet. We know we have all the resources we need to make this a better world, and that the only way our children are going to grow up safe, secure, and in a sustainable world is that if every child in the world has that opportunity. Right now, we represent 5% of the world's population. We consume over 25% of its resources and create more than 30% of its pollution. And the only thing you can say about a system like that is it is a failure. You cannot take that system to India or China or Africa or South America. It doesn't work. Do the math. 5% of the world's population consuming 25% of its resources and contributing over 30% of its pollution. That is a failed system. We have to change it. We know from history that empires never survive. They always collapse. And when they collapse, a void is created, and more wars happen, and then a new empire emerges, which usually isn't any better than the last and could be an awful lot worse. I sure don't want to see my daughter have to wear a veil. I'm not looking to have the Chinese run my country or anybody else. What we must do this time is something that's never been done in history before. We must turn this empire into something new, something different. We must create a new model. So let's not watch the empire collapse. Let's instead transform it. Let's transform it into something that represents the ideals that our founding fathers envisioned when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, and that so many men and women over the centuries have died for in defending. So many of your brothers and sisters in the military have died to defend those principles. So let's turn this country into something that truly represents those principles and take that out to the world as a model. The way we can do this, and the way we must do this, is to go after the power base of the corporatocracy. Please continue working in politics, those of you who do. Continue moving in that avenue, but recognize that unless we change these corporations, that only has some limited benefits. If we want to really change the system, we've got to go after the emperor. And the emperor is not in politics. The emperor is controlling the money. That's the big corporations. These corporations today have one goal. And that goal is to make a few rich men a lot richer. We need to change that so that the goal now becomes one of primarily serving all the employees, even after retirement, through health benefits, etc. Serving their customers, of course. Serving their customers and also serving the people who provide the raw materials that go into those corporations, whether those people live in Ethiopia or in Indonesia or in Uruguay. Taking care of the people that provide the resources and taking care of all the communities and the environments where all of these people live. In other words, these corporations need to become good citizens. They need to become good moral communities. They are our main communities. Most of us look at a globe of the earth and we see all these countries outlined on it, about 200 of them, slightly less, and many of those countries were created by us, by the colonial powers, sort of arbitrarily. But most of those countries don't really impact any other countries, with some obvious exceptions like us. But most of them don't impact other countries. And in any case, thinking of that globe as the geopolitics of this planet is archaic. The real geopolitics of this planet could better be viewed as a bunch of huge clouds that move around this planet, and those clouds are the big corporations. And they really run the geopolitics of this planet. Of the 100 largest economies in the world, 51 are corporations, not governments, and 47 of those are US-based. These are the entities that control the planet. And so we must change those corporations. We must bring them around. They will tell you, and all of our governments will tell you, that every country out there that we're working with ought to be a democracy and ought to be transparent. And I think that's a pretty good idea. But what about the corporations? Every corporation should be democratic and transparent. What we have today is what I call imperialistic capitalism, where a few men make all the decisions and most all the money. What we need to move into is democratic capitalism, which will be much more egalitarian, which in fact represents what our Declaration of Independence called upon. One of the reasons I wanted to be here tonight with you is because I know what incredibly active group you are. And that's what we need, an active group like this to lead the way. We need to transform these corporations. And I know some of you are thinking right now, you're out there, you're saying, but that's too tough. We can't transform the corporations. They're too powerful. They're too strong. They're too big. But the fact of the matter is, they are extremely vulnerable. And they are extremely easy to bring around. And I can cite you so many examples. Just think about, well, when I went to Boston University, the Charles River, you couldn't walk beside of it because it stank so badly. And there were rivers in the Midwest of this country that were on fire with pollution. Those were all corporations that did it, and it was corporations that cleaned it up. Not because they decided they wanted to, but because we told them they had to. And the corporations were destroying the ozone layer with aerosol cans and other types of chemical pollutants. That's changed. We reversed that. And we brought about much more egalitarian policies in corporations regarding race and gender issues. We've had tremendous impact on corporations whenever we've decided that that's what we wanted to do. We need to now use those same techniques to change the basic premise of the corporation so it transforms itself from an imperialistic organization to a democratic one. So it transforms itself from, instead of a place that makes a lot of money for a few people, to take care of its employees and its customers and those who supply the raw materials. I'd like to tell you a little story. I do a lot of work with organizations. I used to do a lot of work, we call something called Shape-Shifting the Corporation, and that was through a nonprofit called Dream Change. You can see it at dreamchange.org if you're interested. But one of my favorite organizations is Rainforest Action Network, RAN. RAN has managed to change the policies of huge corporations as they relate to cutting old growth and rainforest trees. They have changed Boise Cascade, huge organization. They have changed Home Depot and Kinko's. They have changed Citicorp and Goldman Sachs. They've had a tremendous influence on corporations. They do it all non-violently, but they're very creative. They demonstrate, they hang banners, they do all kinds of things. They have less than 40 employees, and they operate on a budget of less than $4 million, and they do amazing, amazing things. And not too long ago, there was a particular, they've also had a huge impact on Mitsubishi. Not long ago, there was a campaign where Rainforest Action Network was going after a huge corporation to get them to change their policies. And they were using all these techniques, and then it got very nasty and ugly between a senior vice president of this big corporation and the founder and then president of Rainforest Action Network, Randy Hayes. They locked horns. It got very, very nasty. In the end, Rainforest Action Network won. They've never lost a campaign. And this big international corporation signed the agreement with Rainforest Action Network that they would no longer cut old growth trees or rainforest trees. A few months after that agreement was signed, I had the good fortune of being at a conference in Santa Barbara, California, with these two men attending, about 30 people, including these two men, the Senior Vice President and Randy Hayes. And on Saturday night, I ended up on this mountain overlooking the Pacific with an almost full moon rising, sitting in a hot tub with these two men, drinking beer, naked.